Hi YouTube, this video is for educational purposes and the intention is to create awareness and educate people on what is going on all over the world. So today we'll be talking about something really very important, and this has really been happening a lot to people that look like me, and it looks like it is not ever going to stop, right? You all remember the last, not well, actually the last one, because a lot has also happened aside from Sonia Massey. We know Majid, what happened to him too. And as at yesterday or something, another one happened to Marcellus, right? Now, Lyn and Shane did not start today, and it is called modern lynching. You all remember back then it happened also, where they also post postcards and other things, invite people to raid. Some after that, marry and party where the Lyn and Shane happened, right? And the fact that this has been happening, and I don't know, for some reasons, I feel like my people have been going through it. And the fact that some of them knew that some certain things are happening and decided not to even speak about it. But I am very happy that someone actually stood out and stood, like, really stood out to talk about it and to talk about how them do this to people that look like me. Let's get into this video.
Hey everybody, Professor Moore here. So recently I've been posting about the horrifying history of the lynching of Black Americans. And my goal has been to expose a part of American history that is too often whitewashed and erased. And I've been receiving a lot of comments talking about how lynching never really ended and is still a reality for Black Americans today. And you're right. Black Americans still face racism and racist violence, and that is a direct continuation and legacy of the racism and violence of the past. Lynching is not ancient history, and the spirit of the lynch mob is still very much alive today. However, we also have to recognize that some progress has been made, and the only reason for that is because of people who dedicated their lives to fighting lynch terror. And because of their dedication and their sacrifice and their activism, we have moved closer to true justice. So before moving on to a discussion of modern lynchings, I want to highlight their struggle and their accomplishments, because the story of civil rights and racial justice is a long story. It's a story of tragedy, triumph, and work that still has to be done. So to start with, who were the people that were fighting to end lynching in America? It has always been Black women who were on the front lines fighting against the lynch mob and the lynch lies. In the 1890s, which was the worst decade of lynchings, activists like Ida B. Wells risked her life to report on these brutal killings. She would actually visit these places where people had just been lynched, and she would interview witnesses and survivors. And it's thanks to her courageous journalism that we have such a good understanding and so much evidence of lynchings today. It was people like Ida B. Wells calling on the U.S. government to make lynching a federal crime. However, the government wouldn't listen because they didn't care. While others remained silent in the face of this violence, it was Black women like the anarchist Lucy Parsons who were using their voices to condemn these brutal killings. In 1892, Parsons said, "Black women are stripped to the skin in the presence of leering, white-skinned, black-hearted brutes, and lashed into insensibility and strangled to death by the limbs of trees. A girl child of 15 years was lynched recently by these brutal bullies. Where has justice fled?" In 1934, Black women at Howard University continued this tradition of resistance by launching a powerful protest movement in Washington, D.C., where they marched with nooses around their necks. They were asking America, how long do they have to fear for their lives and their own country? How long do they have to fear violence from their fellow Americans? The NAACP was also at the forefront of this anti-lynching effort, and it's thanks to activists like Walter White that we have so much good data and statistics on lynching. The NAACP was constantly drawing attention to lynch violence across the country and publishing stories and data in their official magazine, The Crisis. However, you might be surprised to learn that some of the staunchest anti-lynching advocates were on the radical left. I'm talking about communist. I'm talking about socialist. It was the American anti-capitalist movement that was one of the loudest voices calling for an end to lynch terror, believing that it was a crime against the entire working class. Now, in our American school system, we are taught that communists were nothing but anti-American monsters. They were evil. However, it was communists that were standing up for the lives and liberty of Black Americans. If you've ever heard Billie Holiday sing the song Strange Fruit, which is about the horrors of lynching, you'll know how haunting and beautiful this song is. However, we should also remember that this song was written by a communist. His name was Abel Maripol. He wrote the poem Strange Fruit after seeing a photograph of the lynching of two Black men, Thomas Shipp and Abram Smith, in 1930 in Indiana. He was horrified to see that after the lynchers had killed these two men, they threw a party under the lynching tree. As dead bodies dangled above them, these people danced, they sang, they laughed, they posed for photographs, and for some girls, this was their first date night. It was obscene violence like this that communists were fighting to end, and no voice was louder calling for an end to lynchings than the International Labor Defense, or the ILD. The ILD was a communist-affiliated organization that provided free legal services to workers that were facing arrest, trials, and imprisonment for their radical beliefs or their labor activism. In the 1920s and 30s, the ILD led a national anti-lynching campaign. And you can see here from their magazine, Labor Defender, a political cartoon calling lynching a blot on America. Here is a photograph of an ILD protest, and you can see a child holding up a sign that says, "Death to lynchers." The motto of American conservatives and Christians was, "Black life does not matter." Their motto was, "Lynching for life." The motto of the ILD and the American Communist Movement was, "Black lives matter." Their motto was, "Death to the lynchers." So the question becomes, when did lynchers start to be punished? When were the lynchers charged with a crime and imprisoned or even put to death? When did Black life start to matter? It wasn't until 1981 when we finally see a push to punish the lynchers. The killing of Michael Donald in 1981 has often been called the last lynching in America because of what happened to the lynchers. So in 1981, former KKK leader Benny Jack Hayes and other Klansmen kidnapped Michael Donald. They tortured him, they slit his throat, and they hung him from a tree in his neighborhood. Now, what happened after the killing was a complete break with the past. In the past, this lynching would have been done in broad daylight in front of hundreds or thousands of people, and the lynchers would have been looked at as heroes. But in this case, Donald's killers were arrested, they were charged with murder, some of the men were sentenced to life in prison, and the ringleader, Benny Jack Hayes, was sentenced to death. In 1997, Hayes was put to death in the electric chair. And not only that, but Michael Donald's mother was able to file a civil lawsuit against the KKK, which she won, practically bankrupting this terrorist organization. However, the execution of one white supremacist was not a deterrent to others like him. A year after Hayes was executed, on June 7, 1998, in Jasper, Texas, two violent racists named John William King and Lawrence Russell Brewer got in their truck and they went looking for any Black American to kill. They came across 49-year-old James Byrd Jr., who they attacked and tied to the back of their truck. King then proceeded to drive down a secluded road for 3 miles, dragging Byrd behind the truck, tearing him to pieces and killing him. In this lynching of James Byrd Jr., not only were the lynchers arrested and charged with murder, they were both sentenced to death. Brewer was executed in 2011, and King was executed by lethal injection in 2019. I often think about how the last person to see the body of the racist John William King would have noted that on his arm, he had a tattoo of a black man being lynched from a tree. Because for racists like John William King, that is what made America great. Lynching. Even though in the past few decades we've started to see the lynchers punished and put to death, the fact is that the lynching rope still remains a symbol of terrorism in this country and a symbol for the persistence of racist violence against Black Americans. This is why books like these that spoke of the last lynching were premature and the authors spoke too soon. What we've seen with our own eyes over the past few years, over the past few days, is that lynching is not history, and the spirit of the lynch mob is still with us. This is a topic that I'm going to go into more detail in part 2, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, Professor Moore here with part 2 of the fight to end lynching and did lynching ever end? So if you would have gone to the NAACP headquarters in New York City from 1920 to 1938, you would have seen a flag flying out of one of the building's windows. The flag read, "A man was lynched yesterday." It was a powerful message and a reminder of the constant racist violence that was occurring in the country and how normalized it had become. What's sad is that this flag is just as true today as it was then. A man was lynched yesterday. His name was Marcellus Williams, and he was executed by the state of Missouri, even though he was innocent of the crime of murder he was convicted of. The prosecutors, the jurors, and the victim's family all proclaimed his innocence, but none of that mattered. The state murdered him anyway. Another man was lynched a few days before that. His name was Freddie Owens, and he was executed by the state of South Carolina, even though 2 days before the execution, the main witness at the trial signed a statement saying that he falsely testified and identified Owens at the crime scene. There are so many more names we could add to this list of modern lynchings. Nathaniel Woods, executed by the state of Alabama in 2020. Troy Davis, executed by the state of Georgia in 2011. These murders should be called by their true name, legal lynchings. What these executions show is that lynching never went away. Many lynchings simply went behind prison walls. This is something that anti-lynching activists started pointing out as early as the 1930s. As Black communist Harry Haywood put it, lynching by due process of capitalist law, legal lynching, is just as effective as stringing the victim up from a tree. It is safer, less scandalous, being covered by the respectable cloak of capitalist justice. The official Communist Party position was that the court belongs to the lynchers. Black communist William L. Patterson observed in the 1930s that Judge Lynch has put aside his noose, mask, and gasoline for the moment and returned to the courthouse. Here we can see a cartoon from the Chicago Defender where a racist judge stands behind a dead body in an electric chair and says, "Since they're raising such a fuss about lynching, I guess I'll do it this way." The Labor Defender magazine constantly drew attention to these legal lynchings. Here's a cartoon showing how the racist courthouses had become the new lynching trees. Here's another cartoon showing the judge in the role of the lyncher. And here's a cartoon showing how America's courts were carrying on the tradition and terrorism of the Klan. If we look at the statistics and data on American executions, we'll see that lynchings never went away. All we have to do is compare these two maps. The map on the left is of the lynching of Black Americans. The map on the right is of the state execution of Black Americans. They're the same. There is no denying that the death penalty in America is racist and has served as a legal lynch mob. People of color have accounted for a disproportionate 43% of total executions since 1976, and 55% of those currently awaiting execution are people of color. The death penalty has always been a tool of white supremacy and been used to kill and terrorize Black Americans. Let me ask you this question. Can you imagine what happened to Alan Foster happening to a white American? After being convicted of assaulting a white woman in 1935, a 20-year-old Black man named Alan Foster was sentenced to death by the state of North Carolina, who decided to use him as a guinea pig to try out their first gas chamber. A reporter for the Labor Defender described the horror that followed. He said, "Clad only in white shorts, his lithe brown body was strapped into the death chair. The chamber was sealed. The experiment began. Cyanide eggs are dropped into a vat of acid under the chair, and the fumes carry death. It took this young Negro boy 10 minutes to die slowly in horrible torture." A reporter for the Associated Negro Press who watched this execution said, "Whatever the cause, Foster died a death that would make a lynching seem tame by comparison." Let me ask you another question. Can you imagine a white George Stinney Jr.? In 1944, a black 14-year-old named George Stinney Jr. became the youngest person to be executed in modern times. He had been accused of killing 2 white girls. He was found guilty, sentenced to death, and electrocuted in the electric chair. It took 70 years, but finally in 2014, George Stinney Jr. was exonerated. And finally the truth came out that everyone had known from the very beginning. He was innocent. His only crime was black skin. Instead of using the rope or the flame, they used an electric chair, but the lynch spirit was still there. The lynch spirit is still here, and it's not always confined to the courtrooms and prisons either. The lynch mob was alive in Georgia in 2020 when 3 racists hunted down a 25-year-old black man named Ahmaud Arbery and murdered him in the middle of the street in broad daylight while he was jogging. Ahmaud Arbery's father called the killing a modern-day lynching, and so did the mayor of Atlanta. And we know that the lynch culture was alive in this killing because it took 2 months for any arrest to be made. And the only reason why the murderers were arrested is because a video of the killing went viral and activists across the country demanded justice. Can you imagine what would have happened if there was no video evidence of this crime? That's why no one trusts the police when they tell us that the recent hanging deaths of black men are suicides. We know that the police lie, and there is an unwillingness on their part to acknowledge or deal with racist terror. Even though these hanging deaths have been questioned for years, we also know that the lynch mob no longer needs the rope. We all saw the lynch mob come alive in 2020 in Minneapolis when police officer Derek Chauvin used his knee to kill George Floyd in the middle of a street in front of a crowd. In his testimony to Congress, George Floyd's brother called the killing a modern-day lynching. That's the word that many people have used to describe this killing, because what other word is there? What the murder of Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd and Walter Scott and Eric Garner and Philando Castile and Tamir Rice and Breonna Taylor and so many others shows is that lynching is not a part of our past, but something that we are still dealing with in the present. So we can see that this flag that reads "A man was lynched yesterday" will continue to remain true until this country deals with its racist past and its racist present. This flag has been true since 1619, but the question is, how much longer will we allow this flag to fly? If you look at how long it took this country to even acknowledge lynch terror, the outlook is not promising. The first anti-lynching bill was introduced in 1900 by the black congressman George Henry White. And after 200 attempts to make lynching a federal crime, finally, 122 years later, Congress passed the anti-lynching bill. But by this point, it was too late to help the thousands of black Americans who had been killed by white lynch mobs. So my question is, will it take 100 years for us to abolish the racist death penalty? Will it take 100 years for us to reform our racist police departments? How many more lives will be lost by then? When will we finally be able to tear down this flag that says a man was lynched yesterday and put it in a museum where it fucking belongs?
This is all I got from this video, and I really love the fact that he is speaking the truth. This is very heavy. This is really a very heavy one. And Lyn-ched is still happening. Did they stop? Of course not. It's still happening. The last one just happened a day ago, or if it is up to a day or 2 days ago. Depends on when you will see this video. I'm really trying to, talk on this, but yeah. But for how long is this going to continue? That we are free, but we are not free. They say we are free, but we are not free. Now, they started this slogan, make America great again. Like, as if there was a time it was great for people that look like me. I am really terrified and scared for my people all the time. I am scared. Very scared. Because we wake up every day to stories. We wake up every day to Lyn-ched. We wake up every day not knowing if we're going to make it the next day. This one, you're not thinking of if I'm going to make it the next day just by, I know unforeseen circumstances, but this one is because you are not sure that you as a Black person is safe. My heart has really been very heavy, since after what happened to Marcelo's, within how many weeks of what happened to Sonia Massey, Marcelo, his own happened. And do you know the truth? There will still be more and more. It's not going to stop at that. But how long are we going to continue to let this happen to us? I wake up every day. Sometimes I am so scared to open the internet because I don't want to see something that good. My people are going through it. It's really been a very hard time. They are not making it easy. When we talk about what is going on, they tell us that we are lying. They tell us that things like this don't happen anymore. They tell us that there is no longer sundown towns. If only we know what is happening behind the walls, especially prison walls. And most times, these are the ones that we are able to see. What of the ones we did not see? Like the ones that they saw about how many graves where they buried people that look like me. So many of them. And some of them, the family have been looking for them without knowing that they were buried by the cops. So many of them. So you can imagine if they did not discover the graves. How did people find out? Was because I think the grave was not deep enough. And probably it rained and people started seeing bones. They started investigating to find out that people, I think some even died with their ID card in their pocket. They continue to unalive us. Even with everything going on, I do not see Black people being violent or trying to fight back. The only thing they are working towards is to make sure that a system that has been oppressing them is being dismantled. Is that a bad thing to fight for? No, it's not a bad thing to fight for. To fight for a system that has been oppressing you for how many years and still to this very moment. Now, when you look at all these happening, and when we talk about reparations, and people have the rights and the audacity to come out to tell us, how do we pay you reparations? Reparations for what? for all the mess you all have put my people through. It is not too hard to do. You can pay it. Just pay up. You can't continue to unalive people. You can't continue. Pay reparations. So the ones that want to stay back and continue saying all this will continue. The ones that want to do something else with their lives will look for a way to find their way out. It doesn't matter where they are going to. Oh yeah. My people already do need liberation. I am so scared for you all. I don't know why. Maybe the last one hit me so hard. Marcellus, I don't know if that one really hit me so bad. Maybe I have gotten over what happened to Sonia Massey, but no, I have not actually. Because that was one of the most horrifying thing ever. And now this one. It is so heavy. See you all in my next video. Bye for now.